Let's. Where are we going to start?
I don't know the story, so I ask you this question: who gave you, or where this Godfather of Graffiti label come from?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no clue. But I got labeled with it, and I like it, you know. But I don't know. I do not know where it came from. I don't know if it came from the U.S. I don't know if it came from abroad. I have no clue. But obviously, I was labeled with it, and that's one label that I'm saying that's pretty cool, you know. You know, it's like, I think about it as I say, yeah, I'm Italian. You know, you think about the Godfather, the movie, you know, and you think about the Godfather of Graffiti. I say, that's pretty cool. But I don't know where it came from. I have no clue. And I had it for a lot of years. I just don't know where it came from.
How did you end up having a role, such a big role actually, in Star Wars? How does it end up?
Well, I'll go back. You could edit this however you want to edit it, you know, cut it shorter. But if you tell me I'm talking too long in one thing to move on, I'll move on. I'll start off by explaining to you that I met Henry. I was on the Broadway line on one of the stations photographing, waiting for some of my trains to come by that I did that weekend on the Broadway line. And there was this fella on this platform also snapping, you know, photographs. And that's how I met Henry Chalfant. You know, he came up to me, he introduced himself to me, and so on and so on. And told me he had a studio down in Manhattan on Grand Street, and I would be more than welcome to come down there and see all the photographs that he had taken of my work, and of course other writers. So that's how I met Henry Chalfant. And I used to, you know, whenever I was in Manhattan, I made a pit stop to go see Henry's studio and see what photographs that he had at the time, because he used to make copies and all for the writers, you know, after he shot them, you know. And then one day, he told me he was involved in shooting this documentary that he was hoping that, you know, he asked me and hoped that I would play a part in it. And I was like, all right, Henry, you know. And I didn't think nothing of it, you know. I mean, I think it was filmed in 81 and aired in 82, if I'm not mistaken. So this is 1981. I'm just having fun painting the trains. And he asked me, do you mind if I film you doing a wall? And I'm like, okay, Henry, not a problem. So we did that part, you know. And I still never thought much of it. However, he did ask me also if I would have my mom and talking on the program too. And I told him, no, Henry, I said, I don't think my mom would like to do that, you know? And that's when Scheme and Scheme's mom got the part. So found out later on, basically, it came to my head that he asked me first for that part. So I probably would have had much a bigger part if they gave me that part and the wall part, you know? Again, I never thought much of it. Just, all right, somebody's filming me, you know, and cool. And then it went to television. It would air on PBS. I watched it when it aired. Never watched it again. You know, through all those years, never watched it. However, when people would come up to me, and this has happened with I'm going to use the word foreigners at this point, people outside the U.S. who've come to the U.S. or I've traveled out there, I would hear them say all these little phrases. And I'm like, finally, it's somewhere in the 90s, like 96 or 97. I'm sitting in a little pizza shop with Lumit and about 3 or 4 other guys from overseas, you know. Possibly it could have been Dime back then, or, Lumit. It was probably Lumit, Gore, and Chintz. And finally, one of them said this little phrase again, and I'm like, where's this phrase from? I couldn't understand where, because people would say this to me all the time, and it was all me. Whatever I said in that documentary, people memorized these parts. And then I says, wow, this turned into some sort of a cult type film, you know? And I never knew it all these years because I had bits and doodads and all those little things that I would say, people would repeat to me, and I never thought twice of it, you know? So then as time went on, I was like, wow, this documentary that I said yes to film was probably one of the best things that I did in my life, not even know it, because at that time is what I'm saying it, that it connected me to all these people around the world, you know? And I didn't realize how big of a following I had become. And then if you really look at where it came from, where the stem of it came from, it was basically the documentary, you know? I mean, that's where, between the documentary and the Subway art book, is where these writers from outside of the US got to see who is who.
You know, when you look at the book and you watch the movie, would you say that this is basically what happened back then on the New York subway lines?
Well, when they were filming for Star Wars, it's a shame, but the city just cleaned the trains. So there wasn't as much graffiti on the trains as there would have normally been. And because when I see the trains roll by, especially on the part that Henry's speaking to this older fella about me, and the train rolled up in the background, I had one whole car train on there. I remember it was an American Graffiti train. It said Just a Nifty from the 50s on it. But the trains were, after that, was like all buffed and semi-cleaned. And it was disappointing to see for the documentary that they should have had it at its glory in graffiti on every train. Like every car had something on it that was worth looking at. You know what I'm saying? So when they filmed at a time right after the cleanage, and then they were only getting what was happening at that moment to get back to that point again. So the writers were just starting to go back painting after the trains got cleaned. So there wasn't as much. So you're asking me, was that what it really looked like in a sense of way? No, it was covered. Matter of fact, you go to Italy now and you see trains that are covered where people are going on top of each other, writers are writing over each other. That's how it used to look. Top to bottoms, window downs, another top to bottom over. It was crazy, you know?
But what made you painting all those trains? Was it the competition? Was it the fun? What was it?
I liked the idea that I could paint my name in the Bronx. You know, I could paint the train in the Bronx, and in an hour's time, it'll be in Brooklyn. It was like a moving billboard. This is later on when I realized getting up was about the more you got up, the more famous you got, you know? And I wouldn't care about the other writers. You know, if you look at all my, most of my pieces, they were almost all readable, you know? I could have did crazy wild style that you couldn't read, but that's like another writer to another writer trying to burn another writer. I cared about the people getting on that train in the morning waiting for the train to go to work, and is standing there. And again, I was a product of the early 60s, when my mother used to sit me in front of the TV set and watch cartoons all day with paper and pencil, and I used to draw my cartoons. So I always loved cartoons. So I wanted you to remember that name. I would put the cartoon of the day on that train alongside my name. So all this thing started, you know, from being a little kid having fun to now I'm catching people's attention, you know. I guess I always wanted to be famous, you know, in some sort of a way, you know. And where I came from, that was like the way to do it, you know, through graffiti. and I did it through graffiti. And it was funny because, you know, after I got into tattooing, so I used to tattoo. But before tattooing, and while I was doing graffiti, I also used to airbrush, right? And I used to airbrush T-shirts and sweatwear, all that stuff, right? And when I went from the trains with the airbrushing, people followed me from the airbrushing and tattooing. I ended up having the most well-known, the busiest and the biggest well-known tattoo shop in New York City just from the day of the trains, because these people now saw my name and then they wanted a tattoo by me. You know, it was crazy. So everything just kept snowballing, and it just got so big. But again, there was that time where I didn't realize that how important that I may have been to the whole movement, you know, especially with the style wars, because all the shit that people say, I didn't know nothing about that. You know, it was so crazy. But now I'm starting to put all the puzzles together, starting to understand that, I mean, I was nowhere near the first person writing graffiti, but now I realize that I am an important cog in the machine, you know, that I never realized until not too many years back, you know. So that's a good thing to know.
You didn't have this hip hop background, right? You never had.
I never had.
So how do you feel about movies like Wild Style that exactly painting this picture of, you know, doing breakdance, doing rapping, you know, and all this?
Actually, watching the movie, I find it entertaining to watch. You know, like, and I'm sure I own the movie somewhere in an old VHS. You know, however, watching something from the outside in, I like that. But when I got the label of it, it wasn't a true thing. You know, it's not me. It's not what was all about.
Do you remember what was the first moment where you realized, okay, this is something that went really big after a few years?
Well,
after Star Wars, after Wild Style, after Subway. Because, you know, Crash went to Europe because of a gallery. Futura went because of the Clash. You know, you also went to Europe very early. What was your...
With the galleries, Truyaki is how I got to Europe first. And yes, Amsterdam was my first stop, you know. I could tell you one thing kind of connected to what you had just asked me was, it was funny because, you know, I went to Europe for my first show, and it was in Amsterdam with the Yaki Cornerbill Gallery, right? And then I remember traveling back and forth. You know, we were in Amsterdam, then we started to venture out, and then there's another show somewhere else, whether it was in Belgium or Italy or whatever. But I noticed when we got there was really no graffiti at all, other than, you know, political Marx statements or John Loves Mary and stuff like that. But there was no graffiti like we had in New York. And when we went there, it was really crazy because we're out there in the middle of the daylight, spray painting the walls. I remember one time I was in a park, and the people are just walking by like nothing. And I remember a police officer just walked by me, didn't even stop to look what I was doing. And I just kept painting. And, you know, in Amsterdam, when the trams used to stop, you know, in the middle of the street, we'd pull out a spray can and do a quick throw up on them. Nobody even looked or blinked what we were doing. I was like, wow, it's that easy out here, you know? So we started painting there. And then as we moved out, we started to paint other countries. But one time I was in Amsterdam, and then I got on a train, I remember, but it was a train, not the regular trains, another train that you pass the canals, you see everything, the pastures, everything, the cows, whatever, barn, and then my head spun, and I saw graffiti on this barn. I'm gonna use the word barn, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that didn't come from any of us. That didn't come from New York, and that was my first sign. And I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was still early on when we started getting there, shortly after we got there. And I was like, wow, it's now starting to spread. Now you're going to have writers here in Europe now, And I think Shu may have been one of the earlier guys to really get caught up with it, because if I'm not mistaken with Shu, I believe his dad used to take him to all the gallery shows with the graffiti, if I remember correctly. And, could have been a Shu that I saw back then. I don't know, but it was just graffiti that was not from New York, or from the US. And that was the beginning of it. And that's when I says, wow, there's something happening here. And then what happens? As we kept spreading out to go to different countries, graffiti now is growing and growing and growing. And now look at it, it's everywhere. I mean, third world countries everywhere. It's just insane, and that is like something that is to me is like, wow, I was a part of that, like I helped make that grow. You know what I mean? And, yeah, we did what we did wrong because it's illegal, okay? But we started this whole movement, and it just grew out throughout the world, where it's now part of the world now. It's never going to go anywhere. It's only going to keep growing from here, And so I find it really amazing. I think I veered off the question and all, but I find it real amazing. And when I first saw that first sign of graffiti outside the US is where I knew something was starting to happen.
Do you feel proud about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, when looking at the very beginning,
like I said 2 seconds back, I feel. You said proud. Yeah, I feel proud that I was a piece of the machine that helped bring it out there and continue worldwide. Yes.
When you look at I don't know how much you can remember the very beginnings of graffiti in Europe, but looking at Bando's style and also Shu's style, it was very influenced by
Oh yeah.
You and and Dundee, of course, and
yeah.
Did you look at those kids, those Amsterdam kids or Paris kids back then a little bit like, oh, they're imitating?
No, how do you... I never saw it like that. I never saw well, you can look at it like that, but I never looked at it like that. I mean, I was just like, all right, this is what they had to go by. What did they have to go by? They had, truth is, there was, when Style Wars came out, and then when Subway Art came out. So that's all they really had to go by, more or less, unless you came to New York and you watched the trains all day long. You know what I'm saying? If you didn't, if you never came to New York, that was your only material to learn from. It was like, a teacher giving you a book and say, this is what you got to learn. You just got to hope that, you don't want to be a copier. That was your platform to build from, and then from there, in hopes that you grow into your own style and so forth. So I didn't see it as a bad thing at all. No, I thought it was pretty cool.
So would you agree that after those many years, I mean, 30 years of European graffiti, 40 years or more of the New York Subway graffiti, would you say that there's a European development style now after so many years? Or would you say it's still, this little bit of influence from New York in there?
It depends on what countries you're talking about or what parts of the world that you're talking about. I always see a little bit of New York in in names that are more straight letter styling, you know. But there's those that just go beyond. I mean, you know, when you go into whether it was Delta, Dime, Lumen, got into that three-dimensional stuff, you know. I mean, and I think Germany got labeled for that style. You know what I'm saying? So to me, they had their own little style going on, you know. And then again, different parts of the world, I saw different things. However, you still see the traditional style lettering, which is, you know, graffiti, you know. And I think it's all good. I think it's all good. I mean, I see, you know, and what I really find crazy is, you know, course of the web, I get to see all this stuff now. You know, people that will take like some of my images and flip them into their images, like a dedication type thing, you know, and they constantly, like, you know, like Lumet, I did like the foot of doom, you know, I did the hand of doom, you know. And just recently, I saw 2 images of my scene bubble with the eyeballs popping out. That's in the Subway art book, in the part that I'm standing between the cars, and there was the scene piece there with the eyes there. So I just did 2 separate people from different parts of the world just did a remake of that in their own thing, and I get a lot of that, a lot of those images, and I have enough images like this. I could probably do a Bible like that, you know? And I think that's the cool thing, you know? And
that's Bucharest, I think.
I think it's like really cool that people would do that because they look at that my work so much, and people tell me, I realize this, they tell me that, you know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this today, and things like that, you know? And it doesn't have to be graffiti, just for what I do, it just so happens to connect into them, then make them, you know, go on and do what they want, you know. So yeah, I think all that's cool, and I like it, and it's just it's a nice way for somebody to praise you. You know what I'm saying?
Do you remember the first Europeans coming over to New York? Do you remember that?
In the '80s, when people would get off the plane, and the first thing they would do was try to find me by going to whether it was my tattoo shop, or if I was still airbrushing at this airbrush place that I used to airbrush on the I think it was called Records and stuff. I had a little airbrush spot there. I used to airbrush clothing and stuff, and writers used to find their way over to find me.
So how I can imagine this with Lumet? Lumet just came over, talked to you, and that you made all those walls, or how? I mean.
Lumet, as soon as he finished high school, the first thing he did was get on a plane to come to New York. And he came with, I remember, Gore and Chintz. And it might have been a 4th guy that I can't remember now. And it was like the whole world to him to come to New York and then to paint with me and so on and so on. And from there, we just became good friends, you know, because I started traveling back and forth. You know, he'd come to New York, I would go out there. But through Lumet, I met all the, God knows, I must have met almost the whole Germany of writers, you know what I'm saying? By coming to Germany and meeting all these writers. And, you know...
so you helped networking and...
Yeah, basically, and you know, just started going back and forth and here and there, and next thing you know, we're doing events and stuff. Then all of a sudden, these events pop up. You see this person here, you see that person there, you know. Because again, earlier, you know, right? I did all those hip hop graffiti events, and yeah.
But Bates or all the Danish guys was more or less the same. They also came over to New York.
I think I could be wrong in saying it, but I think I remember I met Bates. I might have met Bates in Germany first, I think. You know, he was doing a wall, and I think we were in, could have been Berlin. I can't remember. Trying to remember, but I don't think I met him in New York first, though. You know.
Talking about Paris, you used to live there for a long time. Paris is more or less the capital next to Berlin. You know, the graffiti capital in Europe. How do you feel about French and Paris graffiti? I mean, what you can say about it? This touched you, or you know, you was looking at it when you used to live there?
Well, I'm gonna tell you. Well, there's a story in this whole thing. You know, it wasn't about the graffiti or anything like that at the moment. I was having a show. It was in 2007. I was doing a show in 2007 in the UK with the D-Face, the Stolen Space. And that show was going to be in October, and I was doing a show in September in Paris. So Nico, again, I can't pronounce the last names. Nico, who owns the Open Space Gallery in Paris, and another guy, Steve, asked me if I would do a show in September that they had I told them, so I got a show in October that I'm working on, and they got me a flat to live in, which was a beautiful place in Châtelet, I remember. And I had the studio of Atlas. You know Atlas? Mm-hmm. So I had his studio. While he was traveling, he loaned me his studio to work. So I went to Paris, and I finished more my, created my work there. And then, September, I forgot how it worked, but I went to September, I did my show, went to the UK, October, came back, and when I came back, because I had all my belongings in Paris, it just so happened to be a beautiful day. The sky was beautiful. I just looked at, the weather was nice. In October, the weather was nice. And I'm like, wow, I always wanted to live in Europe. Always did, but I just love the architecture about, Europe. I'm just a freak for that. It's just like, I could walk around the streets for days and days and just look at all the architecture. And I always wanted to live there for that reason, And it was perfect weather, perfect everything that day. And I had nobody to, I didn't have any family or any girlfriend or anything or a dog that I had to worry about going back to New York. I says, I'm going to stay here. And I just stood there. But when I stood there, I decided to stay there because I wanted to get back into my oil painting, and I wanted to paint my oils. So I was able to get a flat, and I went out and dragged the easel from the art supply place down to my place, and I was going to just oil paint, But I got crazy. I had a nice little French flat, had a fireplace, the old wood rafters, everything, the big windows, the flower pots out the front, everything. It was beautiful. But I put a little twist in it, and I went 70s modern in it. So now I got, everything is red, white, and chrome and glass. Now all my couches and chairs, they were all white leather. I said, how am I going to have oil paints in my flat that everything is white? I'm going to ruin everything. So I needed to get a studio. So I got a studio separate. And then it turned into all these different things started to snowball. So once I got my studio is when I started to really meet most of the writers out there. Like I knew handfuls of them, but I didn't know everyone. So my studio seemed to become the stopping ground for hanging out, right? So no big deal. And that's like a Pro 176. I offered him space in my studio so he can work, and all, and he did, and had other people come in and work in my studio because I had extra space. Long story short is, these were all writers that were hardcore street bombers and trains and everything like that, that swore that they'll never do it on canvas, and it won't become, it belongs on the street. Well, it seems like after I left Paris, all these guys that were hardcore street bombers are now the big names in the galleries, and starting in Paris and spreading out. And I'm like, look at this. This one swore, that one swore, but they're all doing it. You know, everybody's got to eat. I guess that's, you know, if you don't want to, you know, do anything else and you like to paint, whatever, and it worked, it worked. And you were asking me about their work. Well, throw-ups are throw-ups in my eyes, you know. Some people have a real nice looking throw-up to get around, some don't. It is what it is. As far as the style, you know, again, I saw a lot of New York influence in the Paris style. However, now switching why I talked about these guys now going to the galleries, their work has changed drastically. And I'll be honest with you, I think the most part of it, it's very interesting to look at. And it really kills me because while I was in Paris, I spent the 5 years exploring abstract in all different areas that you can go. And I look at a lot of this work and I'm like, you know, when I was trying to eat and sell a piece of work, I couldn't sell this to save my life. And yet they're doing good in the galleries with this work that basically has a lot of influence that what I was doing, and I couldn't do nothing with it. I created 5,200 pieces of work in my 5 years of Paris that we documented of just abstracts, and that had nothing to do with any other type of work that I painted outside of it, of the graffiti work that supported me to be able to do all of that, you know? So it's funny. It's like I watched them go from the street and swear never to galleries, and then all of a sudden, everyone's a gallery artist. Every writer's a gallery artist now, you know? And I feel like, in a sense of a way, that I had part doing to that, because my studio was a stopping point for them to stop in and congregate and hang out and pick and learn, you know what I mean? Whether you were looking to learn or not, you know, and yeah.
So, following you for many years now, seeing what you painted in Paris, you know, with the abstract pieces and stuff, looking at what you're doing now, which is more original again, like original to what you did like 30 years ago.
I can explain that. I would explain it by reversing the clock all the way through. In the beginning, when I started taking the work and put it on canvas, right? My work did not transfer well to the canvas. I was just peeling off what I did on the train and put it on canvas. And I saw that immediately it didn't work, you know? But however, I kept doing it and started going into, and every time I started to go into a different direction, when it was time to make a change from taking my graffiti from the train, transfer to canvas, didn't work on canvas too well in my eyes. I was kept with it, and I saw that I could make a change. However, every time I attempted to make the change, when the change was necessary to be made, I held back and kept giving what the public wanted to see. And that was my biggest mistake, because it held me back my whole life. It held me back. The only times that I've got a chance to go outside the box is when I found downtime somewhere, and it allowed me to veer off the road. So all these years that I fought it, trying to change and do something different. And at that time, it was when I needed to eat. You know, you had to survive. So, you know, that's the life I ended up being, as a painter of some sort. And the graffiti always sold. That every time I wanted to create something that I felt was beyond graffiti and in a different direction, I starved. I couldn't eat. So you know, I fought with the galleries up and down. And like I was telling you earlier, it's a roller coaster ride, you know, and, you know, I tried to show different works of where I'm going now. And because it's not a gradual change and, you know, it seems too much night and day. I've always gotten knocked down and I couldn't paint and produce what I really want to paint and produce because I'm going to starve and I need to survive. So I kept going back to graffiti. And then finally, it's been a fight my whole life. I've been doing this whole gallery thing for over 38 years now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with it. And you had to ask me, why am I doing this now? You know? And I'll be honest with you, I like doing this now. You know why? Because I have total control of it. That's what I figured out. When I dealt with the galleries and when I dealt with anything else has to do with making paintings, it was a fight. And I didn't have total control of it. Now I got total control of it. So I sit here, I make little paintings, and what's the best part about it is, I'm not making $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 paintings that are being bought for freaking hope that I'm a good investment and my paintings sit in a vault and they only bring them out if they think they can flip them for more money. I'm at the point in my life that I don't care what my work is worth, as long as you like it and you're happy with it. Right now, I realize that I have millions and millions of fans, which goes back to when you asked me, about me knowing what I had done or whatever, how important I might be or not. And I never knew this all those years. And now I realize I got millions of fans all around the world. And they can't afford a $5,000, $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 painting or a piece of work from me. You know, but these are the people that truly will hang it in their home and show it off instead of being locked up in a vault or come out in a museum exhibit, you know? So I'm like, what the hell? I said, I could sit all day long and paint my graffiti. It makes me happy that I can do something that I'm in total control of. I'm making you happy that you could afford to have it. I make a couple of dollars and I can afford to live. It's a win-win. I could do this for 2 days a week and pay my bills, and you're happy. And now I got 5 days a week for me to do and create whatever I want to create for myself. You understand where I'm going with that? And it took me a long time to figure this out. I wasn't giving myself time or a chance to grow or a chance to see what I'm capable of doing or not. Because the truth of the matter is, we all know I could put a blindfold on right now and I could paint that painting right there and do it 10 times over in my sleep, basically, you know? But my fans love this. This is what they know of me, and this is all they could afford. I give it to them. They're happy. I'm happy. They gave me 5 days a week to create my own work for myself. That's what they've given me.
Yeah. When looking at graffiti now, I mean, you know, you did this big war with Risk in Miami recently, and when you look at all these big murals popping up worldwide, and
I'm not into them.
Yeah, I see.
I went under protest with Risk to do that. He wanted to do a complete graffiti style piece, my traditional with the exploding walls, everything and all. And I was like, okay, we'll do it. After I fought with him that I didn't want to do it because you know what? My time was on the trains to paint big like that, you know? And trains weren't even that big compared to what they're doing on the buildings today. But what was you going to ask me?
How do you look at it? I mean, after 40 years, what happened to graffiti now is, you know, there are so many different...
It's changing. Everything has to change. That's why I can't understand why I couldn't change through the years. But everything is supposed to change, you know? I mean, and you see, that seems to be the next level now. It's like, back in my day, who's going to outdo themselves, who is going to outdo the next guy with a whole car top to bottom train. Now it's a top to bottom building, you know? Where if you go look at the stem and see how things grow, you know, the tree grows and everything, well, obviously that's another stem, the way I see it. But the truth is, that's a mural. It's not graffiti. There's no graffiti elements left in it other than maybe if they're using the spray can in any point of a 50-story building. You know what I'm saying?
Are you done with books and everything? I mean, do you think there will be like a biography scene book at any time in the future?
There was a book that came out that was stopped. It was unauthorized, nothing. Those are not my words, nothing. I didn't produce that book. Thought it was supposed to be volumes, like little skinny little volume. You know, when they make these little volume 1, volume 2. And I had the French courts had to stop. It was a whole big nightmare with lawyers and everything. Everything had everything stopped, and it was a nightmare. But I don't think I'm even ready for a real book yet. You know, there's still, I still think I still have years to go before I'm ready to put out a real book on me that comes from me, you know, from my mouth, you know what I'm saying? And by that time, we probably won't even be printing paper anymore, you know, hopefully, you know, that, when I say hopefully, it means I'm still alive, you know, and then it actually would be more of a thing you would see on screen or whatever, and actually hear me talking and add my own words. I don't want a ghostwriter. I can't speak well. I stumble over my own words, everything. It is. But I'd rather tell my life in my words directly how they come out so people could try to understand what I was really about. And who knows, maybe I'll do it. You know, just so you know, I put stuff down so I don't forget. I have filing cabinets. Like if I'm in the morning, I sit at the desk and I remember something, whatever, I jot down notes, drop the paper in the filing cabinet, and I date it and everything, and it's just part of everything of my life. You know what I'm saying? But when the time comes, maybe I'll have all this material, and maybe I'll say it in my own words, and maybe it won't be released until my death, you know, because I don't think a story should be told when you're still alive. You know what I'm saying? So maybe I just keep going the way I'm going, put my little notes down like I do, and then hopefully I'm able to talk about it all at the end. And then after I die, then it could be, released to the public, you know. And I'm not talking about a book to be sold or anything like that. I'm talking about just my story, and it should be free to everyone. You know what I'm saying? So I still don't think I'm ready for it because I still have time. I didn't have my time yet. So I think that should be included. I think that story should be told of everything that I did that got me to my time. And it should be all in one package. You understand what I'm saying?